Hello, everyone. I'm Cinda Rushton, and I am so delighted to be here with you at the Healing Healthcare Summit with my colleague, Dr. Teri Pipe, as we explore how we can bring mindfulness and contemplative practices into our complex organizations, and thinking about that from the bedside to the boardroom. So I would love to have a chance to introduce you to Dr. Pipe. She is the Dean Emeritus of the Edson School College of Nursing and Health Innovation at Arizona State University, where she served from Dean from 2011 to 2018, and also as ASU's Chief Wellbeing Officer from 2017 to 2021, which was a very important role and time in the university's history. She's the founding director of ASU's Center for Mindfulness, Compassion, and Resilience, all issues that we care about. And before she went to Arizona State University, she served as Mayo Clinic's Arizona Director of Nursing Research and Innovation for 11 years. And what I know about Teri is that she's a leader. She is an incredible thinker and also a mindfulness practitioner. And so I want to introduce her to you today.
Thank you so much, Cinda. That was getting to meet you and have conversation with you has been just such a wonderful gift. So thank you for that gracious introduction. And I'm wondering if we could just do an arrival practice now together to just get us all present. And so just eyes open, wherever you are, just sense right now, where is your mind? And where is your body? And then if you'd like, you can simply sit in a comfortable position, and you're welcome to close down your eyes or soften your gaze, but you don't have to. It's all an invitation. So starting to draw your attention inward. Just seeing if you can bring your body and your mind and your being all in one place in this moment. Simply an invitation to arrive here, to let go of whatever the day has held for you or might hold in the future, and to simply give yourself this gift of being present with yourself and with us as community. So noticing where your feet hit the floor, where your body is in the chair or standing, whatever you happen to be doing, just noticing, really drawing your attention from your mind, your busy mind, into your body. Noticing your heart beating. Noticing your presence within yourself. Perhaps for the first time today, meeting yourself where you are in this moment. Really no judgment if you feel scattered or if you are having trouble arriving. That's not a problem. It's just a chance to notice and be tranquil and alert, awake with that experience, whatever your experience is. And so noticing your feet on the floor as a reminder of your grounding on this planet, on this earth, and that wherever you are, you're not where I am and you're not where Cinda is. We are not all together in the same place, and yet here we are practicing. And so we are a community, and we're building this sense of community and togetherness just by being present within ourselves at the same time, in the same moment, with others. So now, as a way to just end this arrival practice, maybe bringing some movements into your body in whatever way your body wants to move right now. And then fluttering your eyes open if they've been closed and becoming more aware of your environment, whatever that is. And just noticing, how do you feel now? What was your experience in that very brief centering and arrival practice? Thank you, Cinda. Thank you for practicing with me today.
Of course, it was really wonderful to, excuse me, to pause together in the moment, because I think we're all so distracted most of the time. So with that sort of arriving here in today's conversation, as a practitioner of mindfulness and contemplative practices, I wondered, Teri, if you could talk a little bit about how your experience using those practices has supported you as a leader.
This is such a great question, and it has so many layers to it, but I'll just kind of list some ways. I am so fortunate to have this mindfulness practice, and I'm so fortunate to be a nurse. As a leader within healthcare and higher ed, my nursing background, coupled with this sense of presence and compassion, has just been such a wonderful skill set and attitude to have. I think, one way that it's really served me is to be able to listen with more than my ears, to listen with my whole being. And, in nursing, we always start with our assessment, right? That's how we were taught, and how we do things is we do a comprehensive assessment. And so sitting with, drawing the attention inward and assessing, who am I today, and how am I, and what's going on for me, and what's the landscape of my emotions today, and just checking in helps me to be authentic, to really see with as much clarity as I can who I am, so that I can bring that to those who I lead. And we all lead together, and we're all leaders, whether we're leading our own life or helping others navigate the waters. So, the first thing is to be present and to notice, and then to also, as time goes by, and even in a beginning mindfulness practice, when we come into that stillness with ourselves, what generally happens is we notice that we're not the same every day. We show up differently every single day or during times of the day. And so noticing that things change, I change, you change, we're always growing and developing. What naturally happens is that we become a bit more compassionate with ourselves, just a little bit more graceful and understanding when we see the flaws, or when we, just life happens and maybe we don't behave or talk or think in the way that we might want to. But just over time, that sense of compassion and gentleness comes. And then you just can't help but treat other people that way. And I think particularly in today's world, having that practice and creating a sense of home within myself, a safe place, is really, other people can sense that, and then they feel safe with me. So they're much more ready to build relationship and to open up in ways that they might not otherwise be. I mean, it's not always the case, of course, but that's, I think, in general, mindfulness has helped me be an authentic leader. And I think what the research says about leadership is that people really want to have the sense of trust in who they are led by, that who they are is who they say they are. just that authenticity. And so mindfulness has been definitely a portal into that world.
Teri, I love what you said about being who you really are. I think as a leader, sometimes we get messages that we should be somebody else. And, as we all know, we can't really be anybody else but ourselves, and how, important it is for us to have these resources, to show up and to cultivate these qualities within ourselves, which then also get spread to the people that we're with. So what great advice. As I think about your leadership, the Center for Mindfulness, Compassion, and Resilience, those are big topics, as well as being a dean of a school of nursing. So I wonder, you've had some real experience in trying to create a culture of well-being in these large organizations. And I'm wondering, what have you learned in doing that might be beneficial to other people?
Thank you for that question. I think, one thing is to go where the water is flowing easily. And so to go where people are ready to make changes for positive well-being or for mindfulness, whatever the case might be. So to really, again, assess the situation, know where there are areas of readiness and uptake that would be, really embracing these principles and practices. So that's the first thing, is the assessment piece. Know your landscape, know your resources, know the people that you're working with. Particularly, this was my experience in the university, is that I was working with people from all different disciplines, not only academic disciplines, but, athletics and music and dance and, and financial services, just all units across the university. And so mindfulness and well-being are really a common denominator, right? Everyone has well-being, the sense of that for themselves, whatever, it's subjective, so however they define it. And so looking for areas of readiness and for commonalities and interest, and then cultivating a group, a coalition around, what do you want to do? What do you want to do in this area? And I often use the word that I used or that I learned from Gene Watson, which is co-create. We very seldom from the center or from the well-being work would go in with a standardized approach. Now, certainly we can draw from the research, but it's so much more impactful and useful when people are involved in the change process or involved with really defining what are the interventions or the approaches that are most useful for them. And it might be very different, in the College of Engineering, it might be very different than the College of Journalism. And in the healthcare setting, same thing, radiology might be vastly different than a med-surg unit. So really knowing your audience and listening, using all of your assessment skills to leverage empathy and what you can learn from the organization. And then also celebrating the wins, really taking the time to notice and to bring forward the things that you see that are changing. Because often when people are in the change process, they don't see it for themselves, but you can hold the mirror up to them and celebrate with them.
Yeah, I love the idea of holding the mirror up, because as we all know, our nervous system is not oriented toward the winds. And so, especially in this environment, how hard it is for us to even notice, something good just happened, or we actually are making progress, because it's so hard in healthcare right now, as I know you know. And one of the things that we've struggled with in trying to shift our cultures in healthcare is, how do we engage the leaders at the top? Because I think sometimes, and we've certainly heard a lot of feedback that people at the front lines feel betrayed when things like resilience are used as a weapon or as a band-aid instead of really looking at what's going on in the system itself that may be contributing to the things that are depleting the people who are trying to deliver care. So I wonder, what have you learned about trying to engage leaders who sometimes can be a little bit resistant to these ideas? What's worked?
Thank you for that question. And let's go back and forth on this topic a little bit, because it's, you brought up a lot that we can talk about here, a lot of layers. So, and maybe a good place to start is just what you said about how hard it is to focus on the positive. Neuroscience tells us, and you're already familiar with this, that our brains are built to survive. They're built to look for problems and the negatives in our environment. They're meant to be vigilant, and so that we can address those things in order to survive as a species. So that's known. Taking it up a notch, in nursing and in healthcare, we are taught over and over again, rightly so, to look for problems, to look for changes in patterns that are harmful, to intervene early. And so we, on top of our survival brain, our negativity bias that is standard issue, we learn to identify problems and to act on them quickly. That's, again, all well and good. However, what can happen is that we start to see the negative in ourselves, within ourselves, more vibrantly and boldly than we might normally, because we're educated as nurses and clinicians to look for those things. So, okay, so you've got standard issue, then you've got your clinical learning and your clinical practice that is just, biasing you more to the negativity. And then you've got things in the environment that are really harmful. And I won't list those because you know that you live with them every single day in healthcare. And so there's a reality piece that is there. So for leaders, it is imperative to daily do that big lift of noticing and being real with, the objective facts of what's going on, but doing the lift of knowing that your brain can work for you better if you pull it back over into the more objective and maybe even into the positive spectrum. But that is a big lift. And so for me, mindfulness comes in that, being aware that you daily as a leader are having to do this lift, and it has an energy cost to it. And, you're working hard, even though somebody watching you might not even see it. You're working hard every day just to remain neutral, let alone get positive. So first off, leaders, give yourself some credit and some grace that you're doing the best you can under circumstances no one else has ever lived in before. You weren't prepared for this because nobody could have been prepared for this. So you're doing the best you can. So I guess, cultivating that sense of noticing that negativity bias and that it is work to bring it back over into neutral or positive. And then practicing doing that over and over and over again, not to glaze over problems for sure, not to band-aid over things, but to notice this is what's going wrong, but we need to do the work of looking at the larger scope and what is going right. So a couple of things there. I think also very important that not band-aiding over, not having people just put on a happy face or pretend that things are going well when they're not. That is also, it's harmful to us physiologically when we try to pretend to be happy when we're not. We know that places a great strain on our cardiovascular system and other body systems. So staying with what's true, but also leveraging every ability that you can to guide that course into a more neutral or positive. Okay, so that's just within within your body, within your own system, and sort of being that contagious transmitter of a positive and balanced well-being. And then I really want to have both of us talk about what you brought up about it's not just about teaching individuals how to be resilient. We need to be working as leaders at every level of the system. We need to be working at the political system, the social system, our organizational systems, at the unit level, within ourselves, and making resources available for individuals for health and well-being. So sometimes this gets framed as an either or. You can either have individual resilience and well-being, or you can focus on the organization. It clearly is not. It is systems. And so we need to be working at all of those different levels. That's hard work. It's complex work. But it is our work to be doing it right now. There's
Right.
nobody else going to do it. We're here, and
We're here.
we are enough, and we have resources within us and around us that can be leveraged, I think, to solve these problems. And I want to also say that often the problems are solved best closest to the problem. And so doing some really hard listening and empathy work with the workforce, with the direct care providers, and understanding what is it like to be them? Just asking the question, what is it like to be you right now? And listening without answering, listening without problem solving, listening just to listen and to assure them that you are hearing what it is that their experience is. So I'll stop for now, but I want to hear your answers to that question too, because you have a great expertise in this arena.
It's interesting. Just your advice is so great, and the idea that sometimes leaders have this. It's almost like a tattoo over their head. I'm the fix-it person. Everybody expects me to fix everything. And one of the things that's happened in COVID, of course, is none of us knew how to fix the problem, right? And we weren't responsible for the fact that it happened in lots of circumstances. I mean, the virus happened not because we invited it, because it arrived, and we weren't prepared for it in the ways that we needed to be, obviously. But it's the ability, I think, as a leader to be able to be humble, to be able to be vulnerable with, I don't know the answer. And what happens a lot, I think under pressure, we tend to go to transactional communication, do this, do that, do that. And unfortunately, what happens is the recipients of that communication feel that they are not seen, heard, and understood. And so the idea of how we can be empathic and really listen. Most of the time, the people at the front lines know some answers that we need to listen to, and then the other part, I think, is the idea that this either or, I think, has not served us well in terms of healthcare, that there has been a narrative that has been created that it's only the system, which of course, many of the issues do have a system component to it. But on the other hand, people make up the culture. They are the system. And I find myself always going back to how do we help everybody to harness what's already inside of them and strengthen that, so that in the midst of these big changes you're talking about, we have resources, that we can meet the moment rather than being more disabled by the very real and important system factors as well.
I really appreciate that viewpoint, and you're so right that leaders with that label, I fix it on their horns. We can step into that role so easily because we've been rewarded for it. As leaders, part of why you got to be a leader is that you're really great at problem solving, and over the months or years or decades, you've become really astute at it, and rewarded for it. And so it's so easy to fall into that automatic role of I can fix it. And when you can't, so uncomfortable. And so I think, in conversations with leaders, giving permission to not know the answer and to listen, um, just listen with no defensiveness, listen with the ability to absorb the anger and the betrayal and despair that is there, not absorb it, is it, I don't mean in the sense of it becoming part of you, but absorb it in the shock absorber role, and just a willingness to create an open container and a safe space for people to talk about those experiences and emotions in a way that they do feel heard. Because we can't, in my view, in my opinion, I don't think that we'll come up with the creative solutions until we get through some of the dealing with the suffering. We have to address the fatigue and the just the injury that has happened, and it will take time. These solutions are, if they were easy, and if there was a one size fits all, we would all be right about it, and we'd be doing it. But I think it is more complicated than that, and having, as a leader, having the ability to sit with suffering and to sit with anger and the sense of betrayal is really a way to help people through it, to help workers and organizations through it. And not that we get stuck there, but really seeing that as a stage for post-traumatic growth and freedom and autonomy and agency. So I'm not advocating that we get stuck in sadness or suffering, but I am really thinking that we need to acknowledge it and help people move through it in a safe, supported way.
Yeah. You talked about leaders holding the suffering, and I think that's uncomfortable for some leaders as well. Our inclination is to turn away, to deny it, or to numb out, or just go through the motions, or get angry ourselves. And so I think that's an opportunity, as you started out talking about leaders noticing, where am I today? And not to dismiss those feelings, because there's legitimate reasons for all of what leaders feel, and to have also a safe place for leaders to express and work through those kinds of experiences together. I don't know, sometimes I think leaders feel pretty lonely, of feeling like I have to be the strong one, and I don't feel so strong today.
Yeah.
I think that's also where empathy toward the suffering of the leaders is really important, that we not forget that as well.
So true. And when you said the word numbing, I think it's just so spot on that. So let's talk about that a little bit, because I think in the context of burnout and distress in the workplace, so much of what happens is that when clinicians are exposed to difficult situations over and over and over again, it is self-protective to sort of numb a bit. And maybe when you get home from work, you're watching TV more than you should, or drinking, or eating, or taking drugs, or shopping, or so many things that we can do to numb down. And for some of those strategies, a little bit is okay. I mean, but for some of them, a little bit is really harmful. So seeing numbing as a coping behavior that carried to an extreme really becomes self-harming. And that when we numb down to the difficult things, we also numb to the joy and the happiness and that human connection that we can experience as nurses, as leaders, as people walking the earth. So these numbing behaviors have really gotten us in a bit of a pickle in terms of, they become habitual and they do provide comfort for a short time, but when we use them routinely and automatically, that's when it can become problematic. And so the connection here is that with mindfulness, we can be more attuned to what is my numbing behavior? What am I trying to numb against? How can I sit with this discomfort rather than numbing down to it? And by sitting with it, can I deal with it a little bit more effectively and move on and maybe choose some different behaviors to support my wholeness and my well-being instead? And then thinking, more in terms of numbing, when we numb down to the joy and the humanity that we have easy access to. I mean, you walk through a hospital, you have easy access to humanity. You have easy access to moment by moment connection. But when we're numb to it, we don't take the opportunity to it, or we don't take the opportunity to really make it integrated into who we are and to get the joy that comes from that. And so, after days or months acting in that numbed down way, it can be very harmful. And we need to, I think, find ways to tell stories of when we did make meaningful connections and use that as a spark for awareness and tranquility.
Such a great suggestion, Teri, of I've had so many colleagues who've said, I feel like a shell of myself walking around. I don't feel any empathy at all for my patients or for my colleagues. And that scares us. It really does scare us that we are caring people. And I've lost track of that part of myself. And so there's this, in a way, a kind of identity crisis, of who am I now, having been through that. And one of the things I'm wondering about as you're talking and thinking about the system and leadership is the stigma around access to mental health resources. And, I know we've had lots of surveys in nursing in particular that even though the resources are available, that nurses and others don't use them. So I'm wondering, how do we create a system where seeking mental health resources is viewed as an act of integrity and strength rather than, somehow deficient or that I failed because I need help? Any thoughts on that?
Well, I'll borrow from my experience at the university, and that is working with emerging adults, and they have worked very hard as a population to decrease that stigma for mental health services, and they're winning that battle, I think. And so the stigma has been reduced, and access to mental health services has, we've seen huge increases in the use of mental health services, behavioral health services. And in part, I think that is due to a reduction in the stigma. So I think we can look to maybe our emerging adult population. How did they do it? They did it by normalizing mental health services, behavioral health services. And so, just talking about it, people that are courageous enough to tell their stories about how it worked for them, how they found access to it, how they're incorporating it into their life. And so I think the narrative can be shaped and can be changed. So I have a lot of hope, given what we're seeing in that population. How to translate that into the healthcare clinician workforce, I think that would be amazing work to do. And really thinking about, how do we normalize and increase access? How do we make it easy? And safe, very safe for people to talk about it, and sharing our success stories in that arena.
I think as we kind of consider, from a system point of view, a lot of organizations say, well, we have mental health services, but then when someone tries to access them, the barriers to actually getting an appointment and having a session or getting treatment often is prolonged. And so when I think about, what leaders could do, would be to make that, as you said, accessible and not complicated and not onerous, because what we know is when you're depleted, anything feels hard, and so we have to make it possible for people who say, I'm not feeling so great, I might need some help. It's an act of courage for me to even admit that. And if I could easily get access to some resource, I might be able to receive it. But if I have to do a lot of work, it's not going to happen.
Right. That is right. And I think building a spectrum of, how can we meet people where they are, not just mentally, but physically. And, certainly virtual work has given us a lot, and telehealth has given us a lot of opportunity to really leverage the lessons that we're learning during this time, to really, build resource banks to help us with these much needed resources. So, and then I think also recreating the way that we think about mental health services as more of a preventive. It's, of course, we can look at it along a range of healthcare services, but also looking at it across the spectrum of, feeling like you're in crisis, to also feeling like you really are ready to do some preventive work. You're ready to work on some of the things that have been bugging you for a while, to really make all of those levels of care accessible.
Yeah, I'm smiling because it's that whole old adage of we have to do our own human homework, right? We do. Just because we're healthcare professionals doesn't mean that we are exempt from having to do that work. All of us have to as human beings, right? So as we're kind of coming to the close of this, I wonder, as a leader, what would be the most important thing leaders in healthcare can do right now? What would that be?
Well, I don't know that I have a one thing, but I'll try to make it as concise as I can. The first one is to open your heart right now to feel the gratitude. From me to you, from Cinda to you, thank you. There's a lot of gratitude that probably has not been expressed to you yet, that should be. So first of all, thank you. Please be receptive. When you hear that, take it in and know that it is true. Along with that is that you are enough. You don't have to be perfect. You are you, and you have strengths and capabilities that are so needed right now. And often the things that you feel are easy for you are really your superpowers. Your ability as a nurse or a clinician to connect with people, to build relationships, to build back trust, and to really have empathy and compassion. You have those skills. You have them. It's a matter of maybe remembering how useful they are, remembering how valued they are, and nothing that you can take for granted. And so maybe I'll end here, and that is the discomfort that you may feel from being with suffering or listening to people who may be venting their anger at you. Just remember that it may not be about you. It is often it is often about what's happening in their life, and we really never know what is happening in someone else's life. My first research project on mindfulness and nurse leaders taught me that many years ago when we did the baseline assessment for who could be included in our study. We found that this was 2004, a long time ago. Fully a third of the really robust nurse leaders that we were recruiting needed to access care before they could be part of our study. Those numbers have gone up so much. And I never would have known that my colleagues were feeling that way by their outward appearance or their behavior. So I think just remember that you never know what someone is going through, and as gentle as you can be with other people, extend that same sweet care to yourself as best you can. And again, thank you for your work.
Teri, what a gift you have been to all of us today, and what wise advice for those who, see if you can take that in. We have a tendency sometimes to push it away, but just for a moment or two, see if you might be able to drink in some of what Teri has shared and use it as medicine for yourself as you try to serve others. We know you can't give what you don't have. And so we have to invest in ourselves, in our leaders, in our people who are going above and beyond again and again and again. We need to really come alongside them and co-create the solutions that will really sustain all of us. So thank you so much for being with us today. If you're interested in accessing more information about this topic, there will be information on the website for Healing Healthcare Summit, and we invite you to check that out. Teri's got lots of great resources. And we hope that you will join other sessions of the summit and learn from them and share your wisdom with us. We also would love for you to rate this session before you leave. There is a rate session button below your video, and it only takes a minute or two, and we would really appreciate your feedback. So thank you so much for pausing today to be with Dr. Teri Pipe and myself, and to explore some really important and I think fundamental issues in healthcare right now. Thank you.
Thank you.